Start us off, Carter.
And welcome to the show. I'm Tragedy, and here's my co host, Comedy. We're here telling you about sports, I guess.
Am I comedy, or is that like another voice of yours?
No, I was implying you were, but I guess I can do both voices. Hold on. Haha! And I'm Comedy! See, the joke was your team won, but I can do both voices. Ha! Yeah! See, this is a play on a joke that I actually really like from Family Guy. It's like Brian's putting on a show for some reason. Like, he wrote a play, and as everyone's sitting down, it's just like, because you know the trope with theater, like the smiling mask and the frowning mask,
Yes.
representing comedy and tragedy as like the archetypes of drama. And they're both sitting down, and drama just goes, as per usual, this is going to suck for one of us. And I'm like, nah, that's kind of funny. But actually, it's Carter and Kevin Explain Football. Carter here.
I'm. Do now be me, but doing a voice.
And I'm Kevin. How you do? I can't do your voice.
Yeah, my voice is stupid.
What? It just sounds like a voice. I don't know how to describe it. Like, hey, I'm Kevin. How are you?
Yeah.
I can do you doing Beetlejuice, but that's about it. Hey, bub. Hey, I'm Beetlejuice.
I can do an impression of somebody of you, but you're doing an impression of somebody else.
Specifically the 1980s
That
Michael Keaton character, Beetlejuice.
that is that could be a funny, like a real funny running bit to just annoy people with. Like, Tom, this is my impression of Tom if he was doing an impression of somebody else with like a very distinct voice. Like, this is my impression of Callum doing an impression of Kermit the Frog. Hi, Kermit the Frog here. And it's just
right. Like, it just cancels everything out. It literally is the equivalent of my bit where I'll just do a compulsive lie where I'll be like, oh yeah, Go Birds was like a 1960s band trying to capture that old Beatles flair. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go, that was completely made up. But isn't it funny that I did that?
Yeah.
Like, it truly, just you neutralize the joke before it even starts.
Yeah, no, it's just like you add the unnecessary middleman to impressions.
Yeah, but I can do you as Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, yeah, but I can also just do Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Hey, bub. Well, see, the charm of Beetlejuice is it's Michael Keaton actually doing like 40 different voices because he keeps like changing the inflection. I mean, it's the key to so many great comedy characters like Pee-wee, SpongeBob. Honestly, it's fitting because Byrne did Pee-wee, and then that led right into Beetlejuice because Warner Brothers was like, all right, yeah, dig around our script, see if there's anything you like. And he's like, I like this movie called House Ghost, but the name House Ghost sucks dick. Can we change the name? And they're like, I don't know, just call it after the spooky guy. Anyway, but yes, this is Carter and Kevin Explain Football. And folks, we've made it, genuinely, since we've been doing this since what, August?
August, yeah.
Not including the draft, but like, yeah, you know, the season starts in August. We've been doing this for August, 7 months, over half the year, and we are finally on the precipice, ladies and germs. We are finally at the end of the season. The Super Bowl is imminent. But first, we need to do a little pausing and reflecting on the conference collisions.
When do I
arguably
break it to you that it was 6 months?
What? No, because August, September, October, November, December.
August.
I guess I'm counting August and February, even though they're like half months at best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm cheating a little bit, but it's basically 7 months. It's 7 months of discourse. And was there discourse this year, baby? Too much discourse. I'm tired of the discourse. NFL Honors is tonight, and I'm like, at least that discourse will be mostly over.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I feel about it. Anyway, conference games.
Woo, 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 woo! Trying to keep the energy up before I contemplate Tom and Jerrying myself on the train tracks.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Woo! That's an esoteric. God, that's an example of misinformation. People insist that's the final episode of Tom and Jerry. It isn't even close, man.
No.
There's a lot more episodes. But anyway, shall we start with the highlights?
Yeah. Fucking birds to the bowl, baby.
Yeah, this is the comedy part where you get to celebrate that your football team is very, very good. Well built.
Fucking raffle stomped the Chiefs. Or not the Chiefs, who the hell are they?
Commanders. Funny story about that. During because a lot of NFL dignitaries and stuff come to even if your team's not there, you usually have a couple people from each team there. Kiss rings.
Yeah. Have you seen Jameis Winston?
Throw babies. Yeah, he's on a warpath. Myles Garrett.
Jameis Winston's been awesome there. He's asking Saquon who to ask for a job.
Again, it just sucks so much that he was like a really uncool dude in college, because I'm like, man, he really wouldn't be he's the exact kind of personality this league needs. I just wish it was somebody else. Like, it's Gardner Minshew, but on a Super Mario Golden Mushroom.
Yeah.
It's almost perfect. We're this close to greatness.
Minshew's madness, while insane, it typically stays within himself. And then you have Minshew 2.0 with the fucking Mac Hollins from the Bills at the rate he's going.
All I will say, and we'll get my Bills rant out of the way later. All I will say is, man, it is such a relief that he turned out to be a very good signing and actually has some ribs as a wide receiver. Yeah. Because that shit is a lot less cute when you're not making
If you were bad, it's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? But
if he was if he was just brought in and only played on special teams and was doing good stuff, that would have been fine. There's a history of Bills fans gushing over Don Beebe, Steve Tasker, etc. But the fact that they had to play him at wide receiver and he was actually good and led the team in touchdowns, yeah, I'm like, you know what? You can keep doing this shit all day, every day. You were the one good offensive player on the Bills during this conference. Well, that's not true. But you were one of two good players on the Bills offense this game. So you know what? You can do any silly bits you want next year. You can wear as many hats. You can put on as many costumes. You can keep doing the shoeless Joe Jackson thing. That's all you, baby. You've earned this. You've got a free pass to do this in infinity. But anyway, the Eagles kind of just kicked the ever-living Jesus out of the Commanders. Yeah. Oh, wait, my point. So Josh Harris was there, and he said, you know what? We were thinking about changing the name, but, we had such a successful year this year, and the fans have really clinged on to it. And I'm like, if you're a fan, would you have secretly preferred them to kind of stink so you could change the name to something better?
And
I'm like, that's a hot take, right?
That's a hot take, and it's just I think... is that a wrong statement?
Well, it's which do you prefer?
Do you change when you're hot, or do you change when you're cold?
Well, now it's kind of hard to I kind of agree with him. It's hard to justify when you went to when you're one of the 4 teams left and you beat arguably the best team in the league to get there. Yeah. I am kind of shoot, you're right. You really can't justify doing that, huh? And I'm like, it's do you want a cooler name, or do you want to live in the bliss and schadenfreude of absolutely humiliating Dan Snyder? The first real year you have with him completely off the books, you immediately are one of the 4 best teams in the league.
Yeah. No.
And I'm like, yeah, you kind of have to go with that one, don't you?
Yeah, you kind of have to commit to this bit for a minute. But anyway, yeah. I would say a few highlights of the game, besides just insanity and the Eagles taking a couple of turnovers going their way. But the Commanders' first drive, which results in a field goal, took up the first 7-8 minutes of the quarter. And then the Eagles proceed to get one play in. Just one.
60 yards.
And it's just you see them...
Breaks two tackles, does a little spin, walks parallel to the line of scrimmage, and then somehow scores a touchdown.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of how this year's been going.
Yeah, no, you see Saquon Barkley, chatting up with, what's it called? Jalen Hurts right for a second. He's like, I got this. And it's just Hurts is like, all right, sounds good. And then just nails it. And then they fucking do it again in a couple plays later. And the next drive. It was a shorter run, but they didn't stop him.
Right. It is kind of crazy how quickly, I really do think it's the embodiment of the Eagles season in terms of executing exactly what they want to do. Big home run plays with superstars, and getting Vic Fangio to run the platonic ideal of his, defense. Like, the Commanders go on an 18-play drive, only get 54 yards. That's like, what? That's barely like 2.5 yards per play.
Yeah.
Really sweating it out, get a field goal, and they're like, all right, we got the lead. Literally the exact same play. Again, I referenced those cat memes off mic, and it's like, boy, I'm sure happy we were able to get a field goal to start off this game right. I said in the lead. Fuck you, says the fuck you guy. As Saquon Barkley just runs 60 yards away.
Yeah. It's freaking crazy. Like, that's just one of those times where you watch and it's just like, that is just talent. There's no if, ands, or buts around it. It is just talent.
I don't know how you summon it. Like, the thing I just keep thinking of, it literally looks like when you go back and find, like, really dinky high school highlights of, like, professional athletes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you are the one person in this entire, like, of the, like, 70 kids who are, like, hanging out here today. You are the one who actually has a chance to go pro. And you're like, what are they supposed to do? They can't stop him. Like, and these are grown-ass men. An interesting comment I saw is just, like, with Barkley, you almost can't stuff the box, because then, like, if he makes one cut, you're humiliated. Like, Derrick Henry, you have to do that, because the worst thing that can happen is he can, like, once he gets ahead of steam, he's just untackleable. But, like, the best you can hope for is to get 5 or 6 guys 10 yards away, so at least you can, like, try and box Barkley in. Like, maybe you can just pull him down, try to stop him. But it's like, again, it's just it's simultaneously so, like, gratifying, but also infuriating that he could have been doing this the whole time if he had just gone to, like, why couldn't the, like, oh, running backs don't matter thing happen earlier for him?
Yeah.
So he would have fallen in the draft, like, even if he got back to, like, 7th or 10th. Honestly, I'm going to look at that draft. I want to see, like, who else could have taken him and how much better it would have been. Because I'm like, he looks he looks as fast as he did as a rookie, even though he's been playing for 7 years now.
Yeah. It's putting him behind a line, like a crazy, offensive line. And it's just like, it is no longer the Saquon Barkley show, and I keep saying that. But yeah, everybody got touches with the ball, like, on both sides, too. It wasn't just like sure, the Eagles dominated, but Terry McLaurin got a nice touchdown pass. Ertz got some solid drives in. Jaden Daniels, seeing his name right on top.
We're gonna get it right eventually. Yeah. We have to. It's against the law not to at this point. Yeah. McLaurin had a huge touchdown. Hurts had 3 rushing touchdowns. It's crazy. They actually did 3 and 3 together. And then I forgot they had another rushing touchdown.
Yes.
Well, Shipley out of nowhere is like, well, I'll contribute to this.
Yeah, so I can get to that in a minute. But
that was just the fuck you touchdown.
That was such a fuck you. It was yeah, so, like, I feel like the hugest turning point in the game, besides just recovering winning every turnover battle by the Eagles, was in the 4th quarter, where the Eagles lined up for the tush push, and Luvu, arguably a very dirty player, from not just from an Eagles perspective, but other fan perspectives as well, have seen some nasty hits. Like, he had a real nasty after, like, delayed hit on Jared Goff last week or the previous week. So I'm not so, like, he's not the most loved person on the planet. Dude starts just sending himself over the offensive line, and it's just like getting all these plays and all these freaking flags where the refs had to say, we have warned the Commanders, and then followed it up with another false start with, we have told the Commanders that if you do this again, we will just award the Eagles the touchdown. They're just going to award out the points, which is hilarious, because that is just like, that is such a deep lore, like, rule book rule, because there's only so many times you can go half the distance to the goal before it's just like, it's like, all right, I'm on the 6-inch line, but the ball is 20 inches long, or however long a football is, so it's going to be sitting in the end zone. And
it's so funny too because when the tush push first started, there was presented a hypothetical of like, well, what are you supposed to do? And someone's like, what if you just keep going off sides, getting more granular and granular progress until they agree to run a different play? Like, even if it's just a run out of shotgun.
Yeah.
No. And I'm like, I can't. Is that the funniest thing or like the nerdiest thing of like the what's the word? Like the hall monitor being like, excuse me, if you don't stop doing this. But also, it was like a safety thing at that point. You can't dive at someone like a torpedo.
Yeah, but, the Eagles are scumbags, so they'll keep doing it to the end of time.
Right.
But also, I will say, Commanders did stop it a couple times during that game.
Yes. This was a weird week for the tush push not really working in a number of ways for two teams, but we can, I'll elaborate on that later.
Yeah.
For reference, though, just some of the other teams that Saquon Barkley could have went to. All right, the New York Jets would have been just as bad. The Cleveland Browns also would have been bad. The Denver Broncos, although then again,
I feel
Cleveland and Nick Chubb were pretty good together. It was more they just didn't have a quarterback. So that could have been okay.
Yeah, I think him going to the Browns would have been pretty much the same situation as him on the Giants.
The 49ers picked 9th. He would have been a part of their turnaround.
That would have
if he had fallen to the Dolphins.
That would have been big too for them.
Yeah, if basically there are like at least 6 or 7 teams where maybe it wouldn't have been this good, but it would have been pretty good.
Yeah.
And again, I just I don't know. I like it because it's how I wanted this story to go. I really wanted it to be like the guy who got completely screwed over by circumstance, by like the absurdity of like the worst teams get the best players, which I know is like a parody thing and it's all fairness, but like imagine any other workforce working like that. And he finally gets to go to a real football team, and it's immediately like, oh yes, he might be one of the 5 or 6 best running backs to do it. And genuinely, I'm like, I can't think of a running back in my lifetime. Obviously, I was too young for Walter Payton, and I was too young for Barry Sanders, and I was slightly too young for Emmitt Smith. But I'm hard. I watch their highlights, and I'm like, maybe Walter Payton. Like, I genuinely, I'm like, how many guys, like, at this level he's at right now, how many guys would you take over him? He's about to shatter Terrell Davis's, like if he gets what does he need? Like, 28 yards? Like, to break the all-time postseason and regular season record? I don't think it's that many.
It is, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I know, based off of his track record through the entire season so far, it's incredibly doable.
Right. And yeah, this game is just a testament to the Eagles kind of doing as basically everything you need to do to build a winning team in the NFL in terms of like a dominant pass rush and interior defensive line, strong again, a nickel and dime defense that succeeds in tackle. Yeah. Again, the difference between this defense and last year's defense is tackling. Yes. You have a bunch of guys who are really good at tackling now.
You're not,
and that makes all of the difference.
Off James Bradbury like every other play.
Exactly. And on offense, it's win the turnover battle every single time, and have a dominant offensive line that can just dictate the terms. Again, basically, other than having like the elite quarter. Like, if you can't have one of the 5 elite quarterbacks, this is how you win. Like, everything kind of worked out perfectly in a way that is simultaneously very impressive, but also mildly frustrating for everyone else in the NFL. Because it's like, wait a minute, why didn't we just draft Georgia defenders?
Yeah.
Why didn't we just get, like, good coordinators?
It's literally just, like, one of those, like, silly little arguments. And I could say this because I'm on the winning side of them. But it's just, like, they just drafted defensive linemen from the college team that won back-to-back years. And it's just with their defense being a focal point of that win. And it's just like, and that's not your goal too? Like,
it's the baby brain logic of like, why don't they make the whole airplane out of the indestructible black metal? Or like, why don't they just, again, it's baby brain logic of like, why don't we just do the simplest thing? And normally you have an adult who's like, well, they can't do it that way because this, that, and this. And it's like, but this is like, wait a minute, no, why doesn't everyone do that?
Yeah, it's like, this was a very dominant defense of a very winning team that won that was the best team in all of college. Oh,
right.
I should probably pick people from them. That check.
Right.
And it's just like,
and kind of, yeah, exactly.
it's like one of those like silly situations, and it's like, and then until draft night when you get that phone call from Howie about moving up a pick, and it's just like, or two, and getting to like steal Cooper DeJean from Green Bay and stuff, and it's just like, oh, we're
Right.
gonna. It's like that phone
Right.
call is probably the most terrifying phone call in every single GM's office.
Right. And like, look, we can like, there's all the discourse about like, oh, stop glazing Howie, it's so annoying. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know what? He deserves it this time because last season was a disaster. You come off a Super Bowl, start off hot, and then completely implode. The vibes turn into like raw milk, right? Raw milk exposed to the sun almost instantaneously, and you get humiliated in your first playoff game. Yeah. While your opposition go back to the Super Bowl and win another one.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this is feeling different. Like, especially with people like you got Quinyon Mitchell locking down Terry McLaurin, who might be better than any receiver Kansas City has. Thoughts? Conflict?
Do we want to save that for?
We
can talk about it now, or do you want to save that for the Pro Bowl chat?
We'll save it
for like our award show.
Yeah, we'll save it for later. But it's just like one of those things where it's just like he literally volleyball bumped or like set a pass up meant for McLaurin in the end zone. McLaurin missed it and he caught it all while falling, and it's just like, dude, that kid's scary.
Yeah. It's exactly what you're saying, because it's like, yeah, you get Quinyon, you get Cooper, and you finally invest in linebacker position. Literally everything that's been wrong about the Eagles for like the last 2 or 3 seasons, you're like,
they clearly
what if I
just
fix
invested
that?
in it.
Yeah.
It was purely Occam's razor of sometimes the best solution is the most simple, where it's just like, we have problems here, here, and here. Why don't we just fix them? Yeah.
Yeah. What if I just use the money we still have to correct them?
But and then also to like round out the game, because it started off as a very good and close game.
Oh yeah. Well, that was going to be my hot take at the end of our discussion with them.
But the Will Shipley run, like he scored at the end because he made a crazy. How far was it exactly? The play right before he scored the touchdown, dude hoofed it like the majority of the field down to it. Where I think that the reason they scored that high and they didn't just kill the clock from there, was the fact of he made like a well over 30 yards. I don't know the exact yardage run, and they were kind of just like, well, we kind of got to give it to him now. He was super close. He ended on like the 4 or whatever, and it's just like, all right, let's one more win or one more touchdown for the kid because he was so close. Let's just get it to him. And it's just laughing at the fucking Commanders when they do it, to a point where Jordan Mailata was good. I don't know how much you watched the like.
Oh yes, I saw them quoting Bane.
Yeah, he's on mic'd up and he gets caught. And I don't know why I said gets caught saying, but he's saying to one of the defenders of the Commanders, "I don't know what would have broken first, your body or your spirit." It's just like,
your spirit or your body.
And it's like,
as he's like doing pull blocks and annihilating people.
Dude started laughing the second Saquon made that first run, and I don't think he stopped ever since then. Anyway, the other game.
Oh, well, to wrap up, my hot take is just like, I don't even think that was that bad a performance from the Commanders, honestly. Because it's like, there was a point, even with like the field goals they settled for, going into like, at one point, the game was 14-12, and then it was 20-12, great year. And there was a real chance they come down, get the 2-point conversion, and then to end the half, everyone's sweating a little bit. Like, Eagles fans start getting that Eagles stress.
Oh, yeah.
But no, then they fumble the kickoff like goobers. And it really is like, this is a banner year for like your dad's sports opinions of like, oh, you need to be able to run the ball. All this passing shit, it's that. You got to build on the lines, and you got to win the turnover battle. Like, all the old man sports takes have been completely affirmed of like, what's the difference in all these games? oh, well, usually whoever wins the turnover battle wins emphatically, and it's really important to run the ball, and you really need to invest in the defensive line. And it's like, check, check, chippity, check.
It seems like they are playing the most basic form of professional football. Like, if I bet you if I walked into a room with like a bunch of 10-year-olds and it's just like, all right, what do you kids think you need on a good football team? And it's just like a strong lineman, and it's just like, all right, sounds good. A QB that can run, and then another kid's like, no, a QB that can throw, and it's like, all right, QB that can run and throw. You need someone to, like a running back that's really fast, all right, and it's just like it feels like there's no like it's like you need defense that can tackle. There's no. It feels like there's no crazy secret strategy.
And yet it's like this is like a decade in the making, because like you think about where the team was in 2017, and you think of where it was in 2022, and you think of where it is here. This like stretch where you've actually quietly, basically been in the, you've rivaled the Chiefs in terms of Super Bowl appearances.
Yeah.
Like it seems so simple because it's like the most obvious answer is a good one, but it's like the maneuvering, the choice to literally tank a game, so you get a higher draft pick, which you could trade for more assets, then trade back up to get Devontae Smith. Then you trade a first-round pick for A.J. Brown, and then you, you corner the running back market when everyone else is giving up on it, and then you, do all this maneuvering to make sure you can get great defensive line. Like, you think about all the individual moves it took to get here, and you're like, oh, this is some, Benny Gesserit shit. This is our plans are mapped out in centuries, not days. And it's like, but yeah, and it leads to the most basic form of, get explosive football players, get the biggest boys, win the game by not turning the ball over.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And it's
maddening when you think about it.
Yeah, because you also see, I think that the AJ Brown acquisition was the start of Howie Roseman's villain arc for every other team. I feel like that acquisition was the turning point of just him being another GM to being oh shit, no, he's playing he's playing some sort of crazy man's game. What are we doing here? Because I think it was let me see if it is the thing I think it is. Nope, not the right year. I believe it was the 2022 draft. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, where they got they drafted Jordan Davis, a personal favorite of mine, at 13. And then they had another pick at 18. So very close together. And they gave it to the Titans for AJ Brown. And it's just yeah. And it's just it seemed seems like one of those things where it's just all right, this seems a little weird, but all right, we'll accept it. And then it's just all of a sudden AJ Brown starts going off like crazy. And it's what? Why did we let this happen?
Right, and look, I don't know if you've been following basketball, but there was a pretty controversial trade where the Dallas Mavericks gave up MVP favorite Luka Doncic for peanuts on the dollar. And as much as I like AD, it's that's a very asymmetrical trade. It makes you better for maybe 1 year, and then you're going to look like an idiot. And I'm the AJ Brown trade isn't similar because it's well, he had some knee problems, and it's he might never be the number one receiver in the league. He'll always be perennial top 10. But it's the closest in terms of I'm baffled to think that it felt like a trade where I'm wait a minute, did no one else get a chance to bid? I feel you could have gotten slightly more than just a single first round pick. Mm-hmm. This feels like a bit of a steal. Think about how much shit Tyreek Hill got, and he was and he was older than AJ Brown was, had more of an injury hit. He was already starting to reach that point in his career where it's he takes plays off because it's my leg hurts. But I digress. Should we move on to the other game? Well, just the highs of the other game.
Highs of the other game. I only have 1 point written down, and this is the first game that the Chiefs scored over 30 points.
Yes, and boy howdy, you could feel it. It was basically the football game was over, and like I won't do my whole rant on the state of the Bills, but I will do a couple points to compliment the Chiefs. Well, I will say the game was basically over the minute Christian Benford, our one good cornerback, got knocked out, and it is a testament to the Kansas City Chiefs, their preparation, and their sort of like ability. It's very clear that a huge chunk of this year they were kind of just dicking around, experimenting and trying to figure out how to make the offense work without Rashee Rice. And this game was all of those experiments sort of tested and affirmed in terms of their ability to dink and dunk, but also their ability to get a handful of chunk plays where needed. Particularly in the middle with Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Xavier Worthy, they realized that the Bills were dead in the water in terms of their defensive backfield and just picked away. And quietly, Xavier Worthy has had a very good back half to the season. That pick is looking...
Yeah, he's definitely their don't sleep on player. Like, I feel like you don't put like cornerback 3 blocking Worthy. You put someone of higher caliber on Worthy.
Right. He simultaneously don't sleep on and not slept, like, don't sleep on him, but talked about a lot. Because, again, everyone's like, oh, Bills bungle. But then everyone kind of was like, he's not that good. You know, he had that stupid play where he stepped out of bounds against the Bills that cost them the game. Like, he's just doing okay. But then the back half of the year, they just ramped up his targets, ramped up his production. And it was very similar to Rashee Rice, where, like, he starts out the season slow and then just gets very good as they figure out, like, okay, what plays can we actually run with him? And it's very scary to think of this offense having actually, like, for all the talk about, oh, they don't have any wide receivers, they don't have any players, like, what are they doing? It's like, I don't know, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and either Travis Kelce / Noah Brown, Gray with Rice coming back, I'm like, that's actually a pretty decent wide receiver core. Yeah. And the one play that struck me in terms of, like, how they don't show things and how they know how to exploit teams' weaknesses is the inability for the Bills to sort of set the outside of the run game. Like, their defensive ends get very greedy and lose contain. I think Gregory Rousseau lost containment like 3 or 4 times. And there was one play in particular. It's the one where Mahomes rushed for one of his touchdowns. Mm-hmm. I believe they referred to it as a diamond back set, where they just bunch up a couple wide receivers. He takes a snap, immediately goes right, and just bobs and weaves through them. And someone made the comment that they had never seen that play before. And I'm willing to bet that play only got put in the playbook because they saw that the Bills simply couldn't cover it against the Ravens. It was a set the Ravens use a lot with when they want to do designed runs with Lamar. And I think they identified that and basically completely pants the Bills on that end.
Yeah.
It really was a game of, like, really good play. Like, again, Xavier Worthy has a lot of high upside, but for the most part, the Chiefs' offense is, like, the best role players money can buy, slightly overpay for, which is basically what the Bills' defense is. And ultimately, it came down to, the offense just outcoached the defense.
Yeah. No, this was very much, like, I feel like out of maybe 10 attempts of this game, this would be very close to, like, each team would be 5-5. I think.
I heartfully disagree, which I will get to when I do what some kids would describe these days as a manifesto.
Yeah, because, like, I feel like neither team, while the Bills lost, they did not look like trash. The stats down the line for, like, yardage and rushing yards, passing yards, everything is relatively even. It's within a solid standard deviation for all the, like, pretty much all the stats. Like, with the exception of penalties, but, like, sacks allowed, punts, and each team punted twice. Neither team threw an interception. It was time of possession. Bills had 30 minutes, 32 seconds. Chiefs had 29, 28 seconds. It's very close. Like, I feel like this isn't... I feel like this would have been, like, if you run this back, it's not going to be the same exact game.
Well, you're polite to say that, but I disagree in a biblical, intense sense. Shall we move on to the lowlights?
Sure, because I'm terrified of your biblical intensity.
Jesus, I've had like 3 ginger ales. I just wanted to finish. I had 3 ginger ales left. And I'm like, I don't want these taking up space anymore. Because like I keep the box. And I'm like, this box is obtuse and obstructive. So I just started downing ginger ale like there's no tomorrow.
All right. Lows. This is a personal low.
Explain yourself. Vile fiend.
Yeah, a very personal one. I think Tom Brady has grown as a commentator. I'm not saying I think he's one of the best commentators, but after listening to him early in the season compared to this last game, he's kind of like it went from why the fuck are you talking on my TV to all right, like I'm still not your biggest fan, but I'm not hating on you at the moment.
All right. Well, okay.
He got more more comfortable in the role. He got more comfortable in the role, and it was clear. I think if you listen to him back first game calling of the season compared to this game, you will see him in a lot more of a comfortable atmosphere, and he's more likely to say right things. Like, what was it? It was one of the Eagles games where he called Jake Elliott David Akers. Like a kicker who hasn't been on the Eagles in a decade, better part of a decade now. It's just like one of those things where it's like what are you talking about? But he was a lot more in a comfort zone. So I did not hate him as much as I hated him at the beginning of the season as a commentator, but I'm still not his biggest fan.
Well, here's my stance.
He still hates Nick Foles.
Yeah. Well, I would be fucking furious if my defense gave up like 50 points to the backup quarterback, like the fringe journeyman quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, one of my favorite Bill Simmons isms. I hate to quote Bill Simmons on this damn podcast, but I love that he gets so triggered by the Philly special because he's just like, you didn't need to do a trick play there. Our defense was bleeding to death. You could have just run a normal ass play and still gotten the touchdown. It doesn't matter. Like, why are we deifying this even though you could have just run the ball? But I digress. Here's my stance on Brady. I actually do think he could be a good commentator. But the problem is, I really do think someone needs to sit him down. Well, he's in too deep with the Raiders now. But at the start of the season, it should have been like, you can own the Raiders, you can build your like little paradise in Vegas, or you can be a commentator. You actually legally cannot be both. Because, like, again, you look over the week. Yeah, because you look over, like, the rules, like, what he's required to do as the owner. Like, there are very specific rules in terms of, like, okay, you can't question the refs. You'll get fined if you question the refs. You'll get fined if you, like, say certain things about certain players. You can't go to practice. Like, so much of, like, Tony Romo drawing out plays and stuff is because, you know, all the commentators go to practice. They interview players individually who will, like, talk about, like, what their approach to the game is. And that's how you get those little antidotes of, like, I never know how to say that word right, but I digress. But like all those little stories about like, yeah, I was talking to Josh today, and he said, you know, we were gonna really try to emphasize this. Like, he can't do any of the like grunt work, I guess, for lack of a better word, that commentators need to do. The handful of times he's let the mask slip off, and he gets like hypercritical of players. I'm like, see, this is your angle, man. Like, much like Aikman, a quarterback who's like a little surly and is willing to criticize and like jab and like point out like, this is what the person's doing wrong, here's how I would do it, is like super useful. But you kind of can't do that because you also want to own the Raiders, and you're quietly like, again, that is the equivalent of like the Raiders feel like a meth den or something right now, or like someone's planning a heist. Like the team of lunatics they're assembling in Las Vegas right now, it really is like, you know, your dad's a master criminal, and he's like, don't go into the basement because he's got like a giant drill and C4, and he's like mapping something crazy out.
Yeah.
That metaphor fell apart.
It was not your best.
I know.
All right.
I'm sad today.
Yeah.
All right. do the eliminated teams.
Eliminated
do you want to
teams?
start on the positive one or the negative one?
I'm gonna say let's start with the Washington. Let's start with the Commanders.
Well, like
they made it so much further than expected that this is like, I feel like it's almost like they got too far, if that makes sense. Where now, instead of focusing on like, holy shit, our team can actually be really good and entertain value, they were just like, oh, we didn't make it into the Super Bowl. We didn't do this. We fell apart at the end. It's like, God, like, you guys were like one of the worst teams in the league last season.
Well, what's funny is the vibes I'm getting off from the fans isn't as much that as I would have thought. Like, a lot of the fans seem to be genuinely like, yeah. But that's also the advantage of having such a
I'm talking about
awful,
initially
riskless...
after the game.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
Initially after the game, it was a lot of disappointment and stuff, and they've come to warm up around it now, but...
Right. Yeah, that is. And I also think in terms of, like, team building in the future, it puts you in a tricky situation, because in your head, you're like, all right, we'll get at least one more high draft pick. These veteran contracts will hold us over. We'll start looking to spend money a little more, like, aggressively later. And there's an excitement to having a rookie quarterback who's great on a rookie contract.
Yes.
But now you also do have the pressure of, like, okay, we kind of need to turbocharge this. We kind of need to, like, push the chips forward a little harder.
I think it's the same equivalent of C.J. Stroud on the Texans, where after a surprisingly successful first season, you have just made yourself so much more marketable. Not even just to like draft picks, but it's more essentially to free agents.
Right.
I think that's because it's like coming in on year 2, you can be a free agent that helps turn a team around. Like, we'll talk about more later, but Myles Garrett wants to be on a winning team. Cooper Kupp's
right. I was going to say the fact that Cooper Kupp, Myles Garrett going to Commanders to help get them over the top isn't a cartoonish sounding phrase. It's a testament to how well the season went.
Yeah, but now that all the games against Washington have done, I can unobjectively say they had a fucking great season and nothing but good things about them towards like overall.
Right. Yeah. Like, again, they have all the upside in the world right now because, again, they have the quarterback. They have a pretty good offensive line. They have one absolute difference maker at wide receiver. And, like, the biggest thing is, like, again, defense, you hope Lattimore will be a little healthier next year. It seems like he actually really was hurt. You hope you get as lucky with some of your veteran signings, like an Eckler next. Because, a lot of those guys will come in and out. Like, in terms of the stuff you did, like, hopefully, you're probably going to have to move on from Bobby Wagner soon. Really, it's like, genuinely, like, I'm like, you should probably try to overpay for Myles Garrett. If you get, like, one disruptor on defense, that changes a lot.
That changes.
And honestly, right. And I keep saying get speed on offense, but in reality, I'm like, I'm almost like, maybe just wait for the offense. Because I'm like 50% sure that we're going to completely implode next season and everyone will be on sale. And I'm like, you could probably get Waddle on a discount, and that, like, solves your speed problem.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, you really don't need that much.
No, they don't need much. They're very marketable as a promising team now. It's like a little bit of enhancement talent here and there, but it's not like, oh, you're completely fucked if you don't get like this position next season. Like they're very well rounded right. Plus the amount of quality they have now, it's like, oh, like you're like average, like say Madden rating. I would say the average rating for the entire all the players on the Commanders would be like somewhere in the 80s, like mid to like right around that midpoint. But they played like they're in the high 80s, low 90s. So it's like all right, so like you look very promising, you look good. If you do not hit a sophomore slump with Daniels, you're pretty solid.
Right. And, like, yeah, there's always a chance because progress isn't linear. Maybe he has a down year. Maybe he has, like, a little more problems with injuries and stuff. But, like, Yeah, I honestly weirdly feel better about them than I felt the Texans. It's like, well, their offensive line is more stable. And, like, again, you just watch the Texans here and you're like, oh, this should have been a much bigger. Like, they're not as reliant on explosive plays as the Texans were last year.
Yes.
Like, they could dink and dunk. They could just kind of, like, glop down the field and get points.
Yeah, like, they make a big enough hole for Daniels. He's going to sprint for a solid 10 yards.
Right. It feels like the floor is a lot safer than what we saw with the Texans, where it's like, oh, I can't buy a fucking yard, man. Where it felt like there were times where it's like every first down feels like a miracle.
Yeah. All right, you ready to go off?
Yeah, just give me a minute.
All right.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. For the Buffalo Bills, it is over. Because this wasn't just a loss. Losing to them in 2020, your first, like, really great year during this era, that could be considered just a loss. As you were young, you probably overperformed relative to expectations. In the grand scheme of things, you probably watched them get their teeth kicked in by the Buccaneers and go like, oof, dodged a bullet on that one. The 15 seconds game could be considered, 13 seconds, sorry. The 13 seconds game could get called just a game. As infuriating as it was, you're like, we can go toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the world. And you probably see them get the crap kicked out of them by the Bengals and go, oh, that would have been kind of embarrassing to finally beat the Chiefs and lose. But it is very funny that we started doing this show right when the Buffalo Bills turned kind of sour, where they weren't like the spunky team who's going to get there, that team that's just going to get over the hump. And the expectations of Super Bowl or bust really started to break this team. That humiliating Bengals game where I called for like a top-down purge of the team, last season's nightmarish loss to the Chiefs, and this equally embarrassing nightmarish loss to the Chiefs. This wasn't just a loss. This was a total cultural domination, like a total cultural victory for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is now, for at least in the 90s, you got to the Super Bowl and lost 4 times. You weren't even able to get over the hump of the AFC for 4 consecutive times. It is a total profound cult, like we talk about, like, it's the equivalent of like when FDR won 48 states. It's the equivalent of like when Reagan won 48 states. A true, complete, everything is different now kind of loss that makes you question everything about your team, how it's built, and how the players handle pressure. Because this was a humiliating game. It honestly did not feel close for 90% of it. At no point did I truly believe this team was capable of beating them. And honestly, if it were not for the inexplicable clutch gene of Mack Hollins, it would have been a beatdown. The game was 21-10, and it was looking very, very ugly to end the half. And Mack Hollins pulls off genuinely one of the best catches I've ever seen a Bills player make for Josh Allen, and manages to keep it close going into half. Yeah. And it is a combination of things. It is a combination of, you look at these teams, and simply on a coaching level, you are not even close. This was arguably Sean McDermott's best year as a coach, where he changed things. He wasn't as rigid as he usually is. He made better decisions in the clutch, and he still got absolutely rope-a-doped. The Bills coaching flinched. They went away from what worked. They went away from the running game. They insisted on running a tush-push that didn't even work, that kept failing, knowing that they weren't going to get favorable positioning. Josh came out a little skittish. They weren't able to get him calmed down until late into the second quarter. And in the most critical moments of the game, the final 2 drives, you simply had no meaningful answers for the Kansas City Chiefs, a team who had not scored 30 points in the entire year. I know they got one stop to force a field goal, but, that ended up being the difference of the game anyway.
30 points was their max. Their highest of all the games.
You let them score 11 points in the fourth quarter. 11 points. Like, if you could have even stopped that field goal, it's a completely different game. And it's not just like the coaching was bad, like the strategy was bad, because at the end of the day, like, the situation is you either find better coaches or you get more talent. And unfortunately, you're probably not going to be able to find better coaches. The folly of being just good enough is you can talk yourself out of firing your coaches early enough to get into the hunt. Like, maybe if you could have lost in the divisional round, it might have been better for you to lose to the Ravens, because you could have talked yourself into going for Pete Carroll. You could have talked yourself into trying at the last minute to get Vrabel. You could have, I guess, at least tested if Belichick was serious.
Yeah, if they blew it earlier in the season and it was like say the scores of the Broncos game in the playoffs was reversed, you can easily qualify that as we need to fire somebody easily. But no, they made a case for themselves.
No, and you need to be profoundly more talented than them if you're going to get over the hump. And you have just proven wholly incapable of doing that. Honestly, just going over the drafts and looking how
let's acknowledge last year's draft.
Yes,
they traded away their
start
first
with last
round
year's
pick.
draft and go in reverse. Yes, it was the perfect embodiment of someone screaming, "I'm not owned, I'm not owned," as they get progressively more owned. Yes, I didn't like Xavier Worthy coming out, but it was so obvious that when the Kansas City Chiefs went for him, they were going to get the full value of him as a player. They were going to fully realize his potential. So not only do you get a worse receiver in comparison, and maybe Keon will work out, but I'm going to be honest, that Patriots game where he just kind of dogged it despite getting the most targets of anyone was a really, really huge red flag. And honestly, it's wholly independent of who you drafted. It's that you actively helped a team who has consistently done better than you with their top draft picks. It's that you actively went out of your way to help them when you had no reason to. And all of the cope, all of the excuse making, doesn't matter because you were emphatically proven wrong. That draft, and then on top of that, if you had drafted Ladd McConkey, you'd be in the fucking Super Bowl right now. Hell, if you drafted Xavier Worthy, at least you would be in the Super Bowl maybe by default because the Chiefs wouldn't have him.
Yeah.
You weren't willing to trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. You weren't willing to trade up for Brock Bowers. You get stuck in that situation. Meanwhile, the Lions, another team who's eating your lunch, who's frankly just better at you at drafting, they get Sam Laporta in the second round. You get Dalton Kincaid in the first round. If you draft Sam Laporta, you're probably in the fucking Super Bowl. I just look, hell, you get Dalton Kincaid, in the next round the Lions get Brian Branch and Sam Laporta. Either one of those people would have made a difference for you.
Yeah.
Going back to 2022, you panic draft Kaiir Elam because once again the Kansas City Chiefs trade up in front of you to get Trent McDuffie. You draft Kaiir Elam, who you know how bad it is as a player that during the little halftime interview, your coach explicitly references that you're having trouble out there. They had to change the entire defensive plan to try and accommodate someone who can't play zone, and he still sucked. Meanwhile, you go into the second round, and you know who was drafted, who you could have had? Cam Jurgens, Trey McBride, and again, the people who actually would have made a difference for this team. And honestly, the draft that I always come back to is the 2021 draft. It's like the first draft you had after losing to a Chiefs team. You draft Gregory Rousseau. You draft Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham with your first two picks. And in between all of those, I just look at some of the people both in between and after that. The Eagles get Landon Dickerson, a core member of their team. And you know who the Kansas City Chiefs get? Creed Humphrey, who is still their center. This is a pantsing. All of this is a pantsing. And that is why it is so depressing. Because again, it would be one thing if you just kept losing to different teams. If you lost to the Bengals one playoffs, to the Ravens in the other playoffs, to the Chargers, I guess, in another playoff. That's just bad luck.
There's no variety.
That's just bad matchup. The fact that it is always the Kansas City Chiefs and that so much of their success, as much as Nick Wright infuriates me, he is absolutely right. All of this is on you. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who decided to trade Kansas City the draft pick that they would use to get Patrick Mahomes. You decided, it probably won't come back to bite us in the ass to let a team in our conference get a quarterback. You let that happen. And then basically every draft after that, they have somehow managed to do better than you, to get more talent than you, and effectively reset. This is a rebuilding year for Kansas City. They're going to come back much better next year with the talent they're getting back, with the talent they're developing, and the fact that Rashee Rice will be back. Their empire is built exclusively on your failure. And at the end of the day, again, it's over. 0-4. There is no rivalry. Rivalries require other teams to win games. The best you can hope for, truly the best case scenario, is you get one or two maybe one pity Super Bowl. Like you have dumb luck and like someone takes the Chiefs out early because you clearly can't beat them. The refs screw up. The refs are too cockshy about this year's like ball placement scandal and basically hand you a win. Or like Patrick Mahomes has his one requisite Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. I miss an entire year because of a freak injury or problem. Like that is your best case scenario. And frankly, who fucking cares in that scenario? Like, this dynasty should have been yours, but you fucked up and let them have it. Like, do you think anyone outside of, like, basketball nerds gives the tiniest fuck that Hakeem and the Rockets won 2 straight while Jordan was hiding in the major leagues from his gambling addiction? No. That is just a weird little footnote in someone else's story. It is a weird little, oh, I bet you're wondering who won those championships while Jordan wasn't around. And fittingly enough, the Rockets are in the exact same scenario where they let the Chicago Bulls build their empire because they drafted someone else. And, like, I'm going to be honest, I feel like so much of this show, because of just the convenient placement of it, is me coming to terms with the fact that I just really don't like this team anymore. Because I've realized I love talking about football. I really do. Over Fortnite, over drinks, over Discord. I love talking about it on this show. I love making dumb jokes. Like, genuinely, this show is one of the bright spots of my life as of late in terms of just doing silly bits and talking about, like, football. But anytime I talked about the Bills this year, I realized I just didn't want to. Like, there's nothing interesting to be said anymore. None of this matters. Like, all of it is just, it's hollow. All of it is, like, it doesn't matter if you don't get to the Super Bowl. And maybe that's a problem with how we commentate sport. And I want to say that's a problem with how we commentate sports. But when someone else's historic success is exclusively built on your profound failure, no, the championships do matter. And like the fact that there is a very real chance that like history is going to be made because of you, it just makes everything else hollow. It doesn't matter what records Josh sets. It doesn't matter that Cook looks actually like a top tier running back. It doesn't matter that this was like a quote unquote rebuild year, because you failed. You failed. And even I even question at this point, if we do just get one before I die, I'm not gonna it's not gonna mean anything to me. Like if all of the buildup, if all of the journey doesn't give me any joy, then why the fuck would the ending give me joy? To get one title and then have it be a footnote. And maybe it's just an existential issue with sports, but there's a bit in BoJack Horseman, and I know, white kid talking about BoJack Horseman. Alert
what
the media.
Else is new?
Yeah, I do. Fucking daring today, aren't we? But it is about, like, I don't know how familiar with the show, but it's Diana who comes into the show as a writer who's going to do a memoir about BoJack, like washed up sort of former sitcom star. And, sort of her and BoJack's arcs are the two arcs that kind of carry the whole show as she becomes, like, tangled up in his complicated life while also trying to figure out what she actually wants in life. And the final season is largely built around her moving to Chicago, her new boyfriend, and like trying to write her life story, trying to do her memoir, talking about like growing up in an adopted kind of abusive family in Boston and not really having the best childhood, and how all of that pain shaped her into the person she is today. One of those things. She keeps trying to make that metaphor about like certain Asian countries like painting over cracks with gold. She keeps trying to make that work, and it's just not clicking. Like, the writing you see of it is cringe. And then, inadvertently, in the process of trying to make this book, she writes a children's detective novel about, like, a kid similar to her, like, solving mysteries and stuff in the mall. Like Judy B. Jones' Encyclopedia Brown kind of thing. And she's furious about this, and she's furious that it's successful, because she's like, ultimately, she finally breaks down, and it's just like, no, I wanted all the stuff I went through as a kid. Like, I wanted all the struggles I went through to mean something. I wanted it to be put in my art because then it means something. And finally, her agent just kind of sits her down and explains, like, sometimes pain isn't, like, an uplifting thing. Like, pain doesn't inspire you. Pain doesn't, like, shape you to be a better person. Sometimes it's just pain. And that's okay. And frankly, that's just kind of how I feel about the Bills right now. Like, none of this, like, getting the Super Bowl wouldn't even make me happy anymore, because at the end of the day, pain is just pain. Year after year of like false hope and disappointment and exhaustion from discourse and everything else, like, just isn't worth it. At the end of the day, I would rather just be playing D&D with my friends and have it be white noise in the background.
Yeah, D&D. I'm not going to be there on Sunday, by the way.
Oh, I was just going to off. Maybe we'll do we'll do it another way, but and to quote the ever iconic wordsmith of our time, Porky Pig, ba-dee, that's all.
It's a solid quote.
But, I mean, he's famous. That's a shame what happened to him the other year.
Yeah.
Poor bastard didn't see that assassin a mile away. But it happens. Which is funny because there's actually a movie with him coming out in they push it back to March, but
it's soon.
Yes, it's soonish.
I still want Wolverine
God knows if it'll be in theaters.
Or Coyote versus Acme, but that'll never happen. But I want it.
Yeah, someone's gonna leak it eventually. Especially with how anti-woke so many studios are going now that they can get away with it. Someone's just gonna get pissed and just be like, it doesn't matter. None of this matters. Shall we hit notable notes?
Yeah. Big trades. We mentioned them already.
Yes.
Myles Garrett of the Browns, top defensive lineman in the entire league, if you ask me.
Yes. He's on the verge of breaking, I believe, Reggie White's record. Reggie White's record for consecutive seasons with 10 sacks. He even got 10 sacks in that year. He got screwed by Mason.
Yeah.
Yes. He recently released a sort of strong-worded letter. I don't know how else to describe it. Formally requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns, kind of pleading his case. I think it's very telling that the fans are like, "No, you're right."
Yeah.
And it's the line. It's the line, and he spit this line back in the face of the GM, who the GM had previously made comments about wanting to keep Myles in Cleveland and quote, have him walk straight from Cleveland to Canton. And Myles just goes, it was never about going from Cleveland to Canton, about going to the Super Bowl. And I really back him up on this, because, fittingly enough, it's another Cleveland Brown that I always think about in terms of, the futility of sport and, the futility of a good player on a team. Joe Thomas, the Hall of Fame offensive lineman, basically people are all pro every single year he played for 10 years. And I've talked about this. He said, during those really dark years where they were winning one game a year, maybe, he said, I would just get in my wife's car, go home, and I would just burst into tears. And it was so bad, she literally just couldn't say anything. Because it's I don't know how to make you feel better about that. And it's just that is so depressing. That truly one of the best guys to ever do it. It just brought him so much pain because it's to what end? I can be the best person to ever do this at my specific position, but to what end if we just suck? It just doesn't make, again, it's what I was talking about. It's sometimes pain isn't worth it if it doesn't, so you gotta succeed. And I'm I really do hope I don't know. Well, I guess in your mind, are they going to trade him? Do you think they're going to call his bluff?
I think they want to call his bluff so badly, but I think the fact that he doesn't believe that they can win anymore, they're not going to call it, and they're going to trade him to somebody for something because hell, even more draft picks. Just because when you have your, I don't know what I was going to say, one of your star, he is their star player. He's their guy. And when he doesn't want to play on the team anymore, morale, gone. The money you invested in him. You're looking at a
real Saquon situation.
Yeah. The money you invested in him, he could phone it in and get 10 sacks in the first 2 games and then just be like, all right, next 16 games of the season, or however many there are, because math is hard, I'm going to be just chilling in the background.
Right,
put me in
my spine.
Yeah, put me in a linebacker. Put me in a safety. Why not? But it's just, I think when you're just, when you are that number one guy, if you want to be gone, you have to let them go. There's
really
no
is
other way around it.
Because it's as bad the vibes will be if you trade him, and it's we just traded arguably one of the 3 best 3 or 4 best players our team has ever had, I'm like, genuinely, Jim Brown, Otto Graham, because he always gets crowbarred into like old man football talk,
and Baker
Joe
Mayfield.
Thomas, and Baker Mayfield. Hey, you know what? He has more playoff games and wins than most Cleveland Browns quarterbacks. That's got to count for something. But like, yeah, the vibes are going to be even worse if he's just there, clearly unhappy. Like, he seems like a stand-up guy. I don't think he would like make a scene. Like, again, that's why the whole like helmet thing was such like a discourse thing, because it's like everyone who talks to him is like, he's a gentleman, he's a literal poet, he writes poetry. He is like truly one of the most upstanding citizens you could ask for in the NFL, and you paired him with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think that is like the most clear sign where it's just scrap the entire playbook, get some first round picks.
Right. Because again, you need more picks. Because at the end of the day, the fastest way you can turn this around, the only way you can really turn it around, is if you have as much raw talent as possible on rookie deals. Because you are not I really do think the NFL, like, maybe they have some clauses in its contract about, like, injuries and stuff that can get it out of it. But if I'm the NFL, I'm forcing them to pay that money out. They have to, an example has to be made of Cleveland for this. Because, again, this was such a black eye, and thank fuck he wasn't good. Because if people had to talk about him as, like, a good quarterback, it would have made the NFL so much worse.
Yeah. No, they had such a, like, just a monkey wrench thrown into, like, the world. I don't know, is the best way to describe it. And it's... He's also not...
You need at least 4... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, you're in a situation where you need at least 4 or 5 of your best players to be on their rookie contracts if you want to get out of this relatively cleanly.
No, but he's already made the declaration in my opinion, not like a douchey manner in the slightest. So
again, he clearly thought about this.
It's well worded. It's clear. It's not like he's not citing any like behind the scenes drama or anything. It's just like, I'm a good player. I want to play in the Super Bowl, mostly win the Super Bowl, but like, I want to be on a team that I'm not going to be going to Cancun every, like, halfway through January every year. I want to have to stay in town
and earn it.
It's
right.
Like, I think that's the thing, and I think any team that picks him up is going to be the luckiest team. He wants to be on a winning team, and it's like, all right, there's a lot of options.
Well, also, on the note of the Browns, before we talk about teams, it is worth noting the Browns do have the second pick, and Abdul Carter is... I'm not going to say he's Myles Garrett, but he is a top-tier sort of considered like a generational defensive end talent. The challenge is just, are the Titans really going to go with a quarterback first? Because a lot of talk is like they might go Hunter or... But if you can get Abdul Carter, it just makes it easier to do this.
Just a safety bet.
Right.
I don't expect the Eagles to get it at 32 or when Howie gets them into the top 10 somehow.
But I'm looking over these teams. Genuinely, all 4 of the final 4 teams could really justify doing this. In order, I would say, like, the Commanders need him the most.
I think the Commanders need him the most, and they would be a very, like, you're showing off your talent level team.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Bills are, like, the Bills and Chiefs are like those, like, you would look stunning on their teams too, but where's your star? I mean, actually, it's where's your star level compared to like Chris Jones for the Chiefs? Bills, you would probably be a top defensive star very quickly, and then the Eagles. That
just feels like if Howie wants, like I said, if Howie just wants to have a complete cultural victory, if he wants to have a complete cultural victory over the NFL, that's what he does. But even just like on the fringes, like
the Eagles don't need. I was gonna say the Eagles don't need him, especially with how their defense has been playing this year. It is just going to be a matter of if Howie Roseman wants him. He's gonna fucking rob another team, and they're gonna have another Deshaun Watson situation in Cleveland probably. Why not?
Right. But yeah, the Lions, I could see doing an impulse trade because of how embarrassing that ending was. The Packers are a sneaky fun selection.
Packers would be fun.
Because they're similar to the Bills, where they just don't have enough star talent on defense.
Yeah.
Chargers in a similar vein.
Yeah, Broncos would be like a Washington caliber of like a very high upside based off of the season.
Yeah,
you get thrown on there, you could be a top star, and you can help be a part of turning a team's talent around.
That is like we're going all in on defense, burn all the other boats. We're going to win by having a better defense than everyone. Well, see, the Bengals don't even want to pay Trey Hendrickson, so I can't imagine they'd do that. The Bucs would be fun pairing him with Baker Mayfield again.
That would be funny.
In terms of teams drafting in the top 10, I would say sneakily the Raiders or the Bears in terms of like, look, they're not good now, but like we could get this going really quick. Please don't let them go to the 49ers.
I think, please don't let them go to the 49ers. I think the Raiders need their early picks more than the Bears, because the Bears are like, they're clearly reworking through stuff, but they have like a very midline of talent. Of you can go either way. You just happen to be in a very stupidly competitive division this season, so you're gonna be made to look like a bitch on that. And when all three teams are well into the double digits for wins, it's like, all right, you're going to have to take a bunch of these losses. So it's like, I feel like they could have done better. They just got screwed over by their division.
Right.
Because, see, they lost to the Vikings both times. They lost to the Lions both times. They beat the Packers only once. So, if the other teams were more mid, they could break even and go 1-1. But I don't feel like they would need him. Or need their first draft pick. Raiders need their first draft pick. They need to do something.
Right. I'm pretty sure they're just going to get Shedeur, but we can talk about that when we do our draft discourse. And then also Cooper Kupp released a similar statement, but in the reverse of, hey, the Rams are planning on trading me. I prefer not to, but it is what it is.
And that's the same situation of, you're not really wanted. And I feel like that's more toxic than if you don't want to be there.
Right. Well, that's the thing. They talked about, there was a lot of discourse about trading him at the deadline, but then the team kind of turned it around. Again, it's kind of underrated how well they were able to turn it around, really looking like they were going to get eliminated early. And they're like, you know what? One last ride. Let's go for it. Chips on hardcore, you know the score. And they had a pretty successful playoff run, but at the same time, during it, you're like, yeah, Sean McVay's offense is specifically about funneling all of the carries and all of the touches to one running back and one wide receiver. And as Kupp gets older and just isn't able to stay as healthy, he has running back mileage on those legs. All the end arounds, all of the motion stuff he does, the fact that he treats acts like a running back in when he has the ball in his hands, he just can't be, he can't be a funnel guy anymore. Puka is. It is kind of wild to think of how hard those two train together, and in reality, it's the equivalent of someone who's getting laid off training their replacement.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and it's I'm curious to see who goes for him, because I do think he had his ups and downs this year. He had his moments, and I do think for certain teams, there is going to be a value with him in terms of, he is exclusively going to play, 20% of the offensive snaps. He is literally going to be a closer. Yeah, where you get him on third downs, get him on you get him during the scramble, just a handful of times during the game where you need him.
He's gonna almost certainly be wide receiver 3, if not 2, depending on what the wide receiving room of the team looks like.
Right. I mean, in a lot of ways, I weirdly think he could be. I'm trying to think of how to word this, but basically, he can be for another team what the Rams had with Odell, where it's like, buddy, under no circumstances are you our number one receiver. Because like the Rams got him like kind of mid-ish season on their Super Bowl, and it's like, yeah, like, and he looked great because they had Cooper Kupp taking 90% of the attention, and probably there was a real chance he was going to win Super Bowl MVP in that Super Bowl before he blew his ACL out. And Kupp just had to go like sicko turbo mode. But like, yeah, I think he will find a place. Like, honestly, again, he's another guy where like, if you're one of the top 5 teams, probably worth like a 4th-round flyer on it.
Yeah, I think he's got the ability to have a little bit of a check mark or a flag on all the teams.
Mm-hmm. Like Steelers could definitely use him. Bills, Kansas City, Washington, another great fit in terms of like a senior veteran presence.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is both of these guys are going to be on different teams next year. And it's going to be a matter of like if they're paying a premium for him with Myles Garrett, or they get that they trade something interesting for Kupp. Because I feel like the Rams are at least, even I want to say they're theoretically smart enough that they will not be trading him for nothing. They know how good he is. It's just a matter of how they use him.
They know he's valuable to someone. They just don't have there.
Mm-hmm. All right, shall we go to our question of the week?
Yes, a very good question for you, if I do say so.
All right, the question of the week is, which 2 non-playoff teams do you think would make for the most interesting? Not the best, not the worst. Like, what game you're going to sit down and be like, fuck yeah, let's watch this.
Okay. For teams who aren't in the playoffs.
Yeah. If they made it to the playoffs, they're not on the list.
Okay.
I
am going to say...
I've got a silly option.
Do yours first, because I'm still thinking.
I've got a silly option and a non-silly option.
All right, hit me with the silly one first.
I
have a similar feeling.
Silly one's Jets and Giants. I mean, come on.
That would have been ridiculous.
It's right there.
Right. There is like a what is the timeline where the Jets trading for Aaron Rodgers actually worked out? And I'm like I'm glad it didn't work out because in my head I couldn't process that in my head. But like there is the scenario where I'm like, oh, that would have been funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
The discourse for like Aaron Rodgers just on the mic for 2 weeks. Oh, yeah. Content mine.
Yeah, non-silly option.
What's your serious one?
Seahawks Bengals. I feel like that would be
weird. I was thinking about that one.
I feel like that's very even, not very like drastic. There's that. Both teams have that similar level of like talent, where I feel like the Bengals defense is very comparable to the Seahawks offense, and vice versa.
Right.
So
Seahawks have a really good defense. The Bengals had a historically good offense. Yeah, really did. See, that would have just been a good game.
That would have
2 teams that
they didn't play this season.
Could have made the playoffs.
I double checked. They didn't play this season. I feel like it would have been a fun little watch.
I agree with that one. My silly one probably would have been. What would my silly one? Because I'll agree to that one. But I think my silly one would have been. I'm gonna go. Shoot, this is tough. There's actually a weirdly good amount of options. Okay, I guess my silly option would have been probably Raiders, Bears. I don't know. Wouldn't it have been weird? Or like, oh no. Jaguars, Cowboys, in terms of like 2 teams that came in with slightly too high expectations and then just watched it implode. Yeah. What if they actually were good?
What if they didn't implode?
Right. See, but my serious answer would be probably 49ers, 49ers, Jaguars, in terms of, like, in a scenario where, like, oh, no. 49ers, Bengals, in terms of, like, two teams that had sky-high expectations coming into the year. What would it have looked like if everything worked out for them? No injuries, no, like, flaws. Two teams who have kind of historically been, like, the tragic loser. Well, only recently for the 49ers, but the Bengals for
Bengals
forever.
Definitely, like, tragic loser.
It is wild to think, like, I completely memory hold that they were the first team to win 5 Super Bowls, but you don't think about that now, because, again, they are another footnote in Patrick Mahomes' legacy. They are the, like, noble loser to Mahomes. But, like, yeah, in a scenario where, like, Brandon Ayuk performs up to expectations, Debo doesn't get fucking pneumonia, Ricky Parasol doesn't get shot, they don't just lie about Christian McCaffrey's calves, and on the Bengals, on the other side, what if the defense didn't just completely crater? You know, just two superstar offenses going up against each other.
Yeah.
Well, I know you hate the 49ers, so
I do,
even
but
bringing them up sucks all the air out of the room.
The statement's not wrong, though. All right. Shall we send it home for our... And then have our... We have 2 episodes for the season? Or 3? Do we do... No, we do one post-Super Bowl, so 2 episodes left of this season.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Super Bowl, as we are speaking, the countdown is on. But before we dive into all of the Super Bowl hype, we have a little party to celebrate, to give out some rewards, high-five ourselves for our takes, and just enjoy the season that was before things get very serious. And until then, we'll see you next time.